First of all, notice this line transversing across the forehead of Christ. And look at this, a geometric three-sided square on the bridge of the nose. Also, another triangle right here on the nose, an elongated nose that is indicative of numerous paintings of Christ from the period.
Scholars have identified the owl-like eyes, the elongated nose, and the rest of Vignon's markings on the shroud. Was the shroud the model in the first place?
Here we have some reproductions of some 11th and 12th century paintings in which you'll notice these geometric markings. First of all, right here between the nose, you see that strange geometric U-shaped three-sided square. The owl-like eyes. The elongated nose is a characteristic. Notice the two long strands of hair hanging down on the forehead. On all four of these images, all four, you see the wisps of hair. Not one strand, but you actually have two strands of hair. All of these markings, all of these congruent points lead me to believe that something influenced these artists.
These similarities are not only found in paintings. This coin was struck in 695 AD.
We see on the coin a rather crude image here, but as we rotate our filter and then go back and forth, we notice there are some remarkable similarities. For instance, if we look on the coin, we notice these large clefts off the side of the face here, but if we go to the shroud, we see exactly the same cleft. On the coin, there's a bridge across right here. When we rotate the shroud, we notice the same bridge there. On the coin, there's a little outpouching here. We rotate the shroud, there's the same outpouching right there. As we look at the eyebrows, we see these match up. If we look at this blood stain on the shroud here, we see that in the hair here, if we even drop down to the fold on the shroud across the neck, we see that the iconographer who was doing this die for the coin included this very exactingly. And there's no question who the die cutter thought it was, because here it says, Issa Christus Rex Reginatium, around here, Jesus Christ, King of Kings.
If the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus, then it began its journey here, where Jesus died. In the modern city of Jerusalem, the past is still alive. Many of the customs still reflect the ancient world. Does the burial of the man on the shroud fit with ancient Jewish culture? American-born Rabbi Micha Halpern has lived in Israel for many years. He has made a specialty of first-century Jewish life.
This is the Via Dolorosa. It's about 1 mile long. It's the traditional place from which Jesus walked to his crucifixion. And pilgrims come from all over the world and have been coming for centuries to traverse this very path.
20 shekel book. Anybody want something? $4.
Jerusalem at the time was a Jewish city, and as a result, Jesus would have been buried in the context of Jewish law.
Shroud scholars believe that the burial of Jesus, though hasty, was performed in accordance with Jewish custom.
The Jewish Bible relates that one should remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. On Friday afternoon, people are running and hustling and bustling in order to finish their chores before the Sabbath enters. So too was the case 2,000 years ago. Jesus was taken down from the cross on Friday in order to speedily inter him before the Sabbath day, because nothing can be done on Sabbath. No work, only rest.
Is there any record of the shroud in the earliest years right after the death of Jesus? According to legend, a king in nearby Edessa fell gravely ill and called for the Jewish healer. Jesus has already died, but a cloth bearing his image is delivered to the king. King Abgar is immediately healed, and the miraculous cloth becomes known as the Mandylion. The Mandylion is venerated throughout the Middle East as the image of Christ, and the city of Edessa becomes a center for Christianity.
Mandylion is a word that means little towel. On this little towel was the face of Jesus, painted on a stylized background and usually shown framed.
If the Mandylion was the shroud, why did it show only the face?
It was then known only as a face cloth, but Ian Wilson, the English historian, says, there's a key word in ancient documents, tetradiplon, which means doubled in four. If you double the shroud in four, you end up with a little rectangle with a face in the middle.
Could the cloth of Edessa be the shroud folded to reveal only the face?
The shroud is its own best map to the past. You start with one clue, and it leads to another. Call volunteers, please. In 1978, the STIRP team discovered a number of folds on the shroud. But of those, 8 were prominent. And what we're going to do now is replicate that folding of the shroud.
The raking light photographs proved, yes, there are 8 folds in the shroud. Of course, photography can't tell us when they were made, but it does show that at least at one time in its existence, that shroud was folded in 8. So there would have been a rectangle with the face sitting in the middle of the rectangle.
In the year 944, the Mandylion was moved to Constantinople, where it was periodically placed on public view. There, in 1203, a French knight from the Fourth Crusade reported seeing the image of Christ's body on a cloth. A year later, the Crusaders sacked the city and carried their spoils to Europe. Here, the record of the Mandylion abruptly ends, and the record of the shroud begins.
This is a cave just outside of Jerusalem, which is probably very similar to the type of cave where Jesus himself was buried. It would be closed with a large rock, a boulder most probably, and that's how the Christian Bible actually describes the burial of Jesus.
When the STIRP team examined the underside of the shroud, they found that some pollen grains could not be identified because they were coated with a mineral. This mineral was subsequently analyzed and traced.
And investigating the mineral, they discovered that it was a limestone of sorts. A limestone very, very rare and indigenous to an area outside of Jerusalem. The shroud is covered with blood. So the question would be, why wasn't the body of Jesus properly washed the way in which traditional burial requires in Jewish law? So the answer would be that when there's a tremendous amount of bleeding, one doesn't purify the body with water for fear that one would wash off all of that blood. That blood has to be buried with the body itself. We find that even in today's news accounts of the terror attacks in Israel, let's say, for instance, when in the aftermath of those events, you have rabbis and righteous people going around literally sponging up the blood of victims, which is on the ground, to be buried appropriately.
According to the Christian Bible, there were 2 cloths found in the tomb, the shroud and another cloth. The second was believed to have covered the face of Jesus just after he was taken down from the cross.
Simon Peter saw the cloth lying there on the ground, and also the cloth that had been over his head. This was not with the linen cloth, but rolled up in a place by itself.
This cloth, called the sudarium, is found today in Oviedo in northern Spain. Jorge Rodriguez is a member of Spain's Shroud Study Center, and Mark Goosen has written a recent book about the sudarium and its relationship to the shroud. The sudarium is covered with blood, but there is no image as there is on the shroud. It is believed that this cloth was removed from the face before the body was wrapped in the shroud.
The cloth was running away from danger. It was always just ahead of the invaders, just escaping, always going further north to the safer places, and this is where it stayed. This was the safest place in Spain during the Moorish invasion.
It began its journey out of Jerusalem in the year 614 to escape an advancing Persian army. First taken to Alexandria, it was repeatedly moved westward along the African coast until it reached Toledo in Christian Spain. When the Moorish invasion of Spain began in 711, the sudarium was rushed further north into the mountains and hidden in a cave.